My name is Kilkenny, the host of the Modern Mystic podcast. And today I'm really overjoyed to welcome Michael Sapiro. Dr. Sapiro is a clinical psychologist, psychedelic assisted therapist, transformational coach, writer, meditation teacher, and researcher, and former Buddhist monk. He is on faculty at Esalen Institute, is a fellow at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, and is core faculty in the Psychedelics Today Vital Psychedelic Certification Program. Dr. Sapiro teaches nationally on the art and science of transformation, expanded human capabilities, and future making. Love that. He is the integrative psychologist at Boise Ketamine Clinic, where he offers ketamine-assisted psychotherapy to individuals and groups. He serves first responders, former Navy SEALs, and other special operations team members recovering from trauma exposure. His work is dedicated to personal awakening for the sake of collective and planetary transformation. Michael, welcome to the Modern Mystic podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate being on.
Well, I'm really so happy for our listeners because there are some different topics that I've been wanting to birth and midwife on this podcast and have been waiting for the guests to arrive for such topics. When I read your bio and heard about you and saw some of your work, I was like, okay, this is the being to download this Dharma wisdom for us. So I always ask my guests one question that's a commonality, which is, what does it mean to be a modern mystic? So what does that mean for you and in your world?
It means I take time to be with the ordinary expression of the great mystery of life. So that might be on a walk. I just see a butterfly or a spider web or something, or I just slow down enough to hear a trickle of water in a little stream I'm going by. And I just kind of revel in the simplicity of it, but beneath this kind of simple texture is really the grandeur of life. And so for me, being a modern mystic is really slowing down to the pace of nature, to hear the wisdom of nature and to feel God's presence in everything around me.
Really, really profound. I think that sometimes, especially, with the podcasting art form and the intellectualism that can come on it, we can get sometimes as mystics so out there in the way of our exploration and expansion. And it's so beautiful and truly deep to recapitulate that importance of becoming in sync with nature and really the simple rhythms of nature, which I totally concur are often the most profound. So love that. I wanted to talk about the idea of when we are on our spiritual path, or whatever you want to call it in the way of semantics, but on the path of evolution and at the path of being fiercely committed to awakening, how that can really be something that can be viewed sometimes as being selfish or needing to pull away from. And I know there's some different traditions and philosophical viewpoints that I think we share. But I wanted to start the foray of our conversation with that idea of how, in your experience, seeking one's spiritual path and awakening can really actually contribute to the awakening of collective consciousness, the universal, really evolution of the planet, as you said in your bio even.
I'd like to start with really helping listeners understand the difference between selfishness and self-focus, because those get often confused and people end up throwing away really important self-love, self-care practices because we think we should martyr ourselves or give ourselves to others. and we end up depleting ourselves, burning out, feeling stressed, taking resources that our body, brain, mind, spirit needs and giving it to others. So and I've spoken on this on other podcasts too. So selfishness to me is when we're choosing actions or behaviors that hurt other people. So an example I might, on purpose, like I'm going to choose this for me, knowing this is not good for you. That's when we might call something selfish. So someone who leaves their spouse with all the kids and all the things they got to do just to go drinking with some buddies, and the spouse is left like, hey, I need help, and that other person's like, yeah, I got to do this thing for myself, instead of really being thoughtful of how to manage maybe that might be seen as more selfish than the person who's like, what can I do for my household, for my family, and then also make sure I'm getting time in for myself because I need social time, or I do need to go out with my buddies, but can I do it in a way that is the best for my whole family or for us? So like it's important to understand taking time for ourselves and building a practice is not selfish unless we're doing it in disregarding of other human beings or our animals or our planet's well-being. So it is important that we spend time self-focusing. And then we can, once we have that down, once we understand actually my well-being, my health is of vital importance to not only my life, but my family and my community, then we see it's a responsibility to spend time on ourselves then.
Mm, I love that. And I think that's really, really a helpful way to articulate it. What you said, responsibility, in that word that's often, touted as how and like what is our ability to
Mm-hmm.
respond? And
Mm,
not only in others, like I always hear that in relationship to others, but I love what you're saying because it's really in relationship to oneself.
yes.
And it really is so gorgeous and potent. Something I always like to say when I'm teaching, which I try to live, and it's teaching from my experience, which is like how you do what you do matters. And
Mm-hmm.
it's what you're saying, how can I do no harm to others or as little harm as possible? As many different, really, it's a perennial philosophy in so
Mm-hmm.
many traditions. And that includes myself, and
Yeah.
that includes filling up my own tank and and all the things that then can really be ebullient
Mm-hmm.
and offer out to others.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
we have to feel it's not just like we need to love ourselves because it's so important to love ourselves, and that means our body's health, our mind's well-being, our spiritual life. It's very difficult to keep giving to others and give to our community when we're burning out or we're stressed or we're getting sick. And then we resent our bodies for getting sick. But it's like how much time are you putting into your body? How much time are you putting into your spiritual, psychological life? Of course we're breaking down. You're running your vehicle without stopping it. And you're not even considering the fuel you're putting in the vehicle. Like this is so many folks out listening. I want to encourage us to realize our bodies and our brains and our minds and our hearts need our tending. And that is not a selfish orientation. That's actually a sacred orientation because after all, like we're a manifestation of what is most sacred.
Yeah, yeah, and that's so important. And I think such a pivotal point, the viewpoint that the body is sacred,
Mm-hmm.
the mind is sacred, our
Mm-hmm.
psychology,
Mm-hmm.
the
Yeah.
psychology, the emotions, all the layers of self. I know you have a yoga orientation, and I've
Mm-hmm.
referenced it on this podcast other times, and I have an episode on it about the koshas. So
Mm-hmm.
people listening, the listeners can go back and find the episode on the layers of self, the koshas. But we have all these layers of self like an onion, and all of them are sacred.
Mm-hmm.
And I know from an old bio I read of yours, I don't know how you feel in this moment, but I read the term cashmere shavism
Mm-hmm.
and that being part of your background. And that is a philosophy that I was steeped in a lot as a kid. And
Mm,
it was so I feel like empowering as a
mm,
child
mm.
through that lineage to be taught that all parts of myself were sacred.
That's amazing you had access to that so young.
really such an incredible blessing for sure.
Hmm.
And I feel like just helping and supporting people to understand that. What are some ways that you do that, or practices or hacks or anything? Because I think that's a really deep malady of our society, that a lot of people, once they get on a spiritual path of awakening, they start to not think that, they start to get into
Hmm.
like their spiritual practices and things that take them out of themselves, and these
Hmm.
experiences are less than. So yeah, how do you teach that and support people with that understanding in an embodied experiential way?
Yeah, so embodiment is one of the core components of the work I do, whether it's teaching Dharma or in the psychedelic therapy I do, or especially, in the yoga world, of course, we're going for embodiment. But more importantly, my psychology practice is all about embodiment, because what I'm hoping for are people find their most deepest values, the heart's values, and then it's not philosophical or intellectual. Their heart's values are then lived in the body and felt. So what does joy feel like? What does peace feel like? But so many people are disconnected from the body. So a lot of my work is actually giving them the experiences of the koshas without necessarily calling them that anymore, since I'm not really teaching yoga anymore, but still using that framework to help people get a sense of their breath, the physical body, which is sensations, emotions, and emotions. The language of emotion is sensation. If I say, what is sadness? Sadness is a bundle of feelings. Feelings are sensations. You could feel it in the gut. If I say, what's anger? It's a tightness in the chest. There's a feeling of heat. There's a clenching. So if in order to help people understand their emotions, and then how the mind, which are thoughts and images, and narratives and beliefs, how that creates and it reinforces emotions, and that all is felt in the body. So my job is to actually teach people about their bodies and the language of the body's sensation, and then moving from there, they start understanding, oh, my emotion has a somatic component. So now I can start understanding when I'm feeling something, I can name it because I'm feeling it. This is all about self-awareness. All my work is about self-awareness, learning these different layers of our experience, which are the breath, the sensations of the body, emotions, thoughts, wisdom, intuition, and then awareness itself. Love, joy. These are actually layers of our experience that everyone can access. So my job is to teach people how to be self-aware of every one of those layers of ourself, and then live in awareness of those things while they're breathing, eating, cooking, whatever.
Right. So such a great extrapolation, and that's it. Like some people, like I work doing coaching, intuitive coaching work, I call it, and I think that these layers of self, you and I are both referring to as a general kind of architecture in our mind. There's some people you find who might really be in their bodies, embodied and like really physical.
Mm.
Yet a lot of people are in their mental body, which is
Yes, right.
another part of their body. So these are the koshas, the physical, it's called the Annamaya kosha, and then the Pranamaya kosha is that second layer, which is your breath body. You refer to that. And I
Mhm.
think so many people have a deprivation of that. Do you find
Mhm.
that in your work, like that connection to like that deep, full presence of breath?
Yeah, of course. I mean, because most of us have some kind of experience that might be considered traumatic. And I know I don't want to over traumatize, like there's a culture of everyone's traumatized. And actually, in some cases, a lot of people are, living with trauma. And the trauma is actually physiological as well as spiritual and psychological. And for those of us living with trauma, our body's responding by shortening the breath, by getting tight, by becoming balled up and protective, walled up and protective. I said bald and walled up. And so then the breath becomes short. We breathe into the upper lobes, upper lungs. We're not getting into the deep part, the deeper bottom of our lungs. And we're not getting the nutrients we're needing from the deep breath. Our physiology is hyper aroused. And so breathing, see, I work with PTSD is a specialty of mine. I work with first responders and vets, but really anyone who's scared and has fear, we have to work with the breath. We have to get it down deep into their belly. I am safe. And you have to feel safety to say that too. And a deep breath triggers a response in your body that it is safe. So we're doing a lot with the breath because you have to have an embodied sense of safety for the body then to go, oh, okay, I can breathe deeply. So that kosha is extraordinarily important for us to feel safe and also to regulate our
Amazing.
breathing. Mhm.
Yeah, amazing detail. Yeah, because I mean, as you're speaking, I was thinking of, different, you know, um, examples of trauma that I know my clients, myself, people have been through. And one thread that I could instantly connect is that people go through trauma, they hold their breath. I mean,
Yes,
sometimes
right.
they have to, right? To not
Mhm,
make a sound or,
mhm,
whatever. Um, but it's so, so profound. And I find, with I'm a college professor, and part of what I share is pranayama, which is breath work,
mhm,
every week. And I try to give my students different techniques for them to try
mhm,
on. And I feel like it's similar to mindfulness and meditation as well, that
mhm,
I'll get people and students who come and they say, oh, well, that didn't work for me. I didn't like that. And then when given the opportunity to learn a myriad of different
mhm,
techniques because of their personality, because of perhaps even the quality of trauma, because of whatever genetics, there could be
mhm.
many, many factors. But there's actually like I don't know, like a harmony dating situation that one can get into with meditation and breath work, and you have to find a match.
Mhm.
What is your
Yes.
experience with that, with your
Yeah.
work? Do you find the same thing?
Yes, always, we want to find what's best for their physiology, but we also and for their minds and there's also like try it for a while. See, people don't like what they're not used to. So it's not a matter of just right away, hey, that didn't work. I worked with a SWAT guy and he really didn't like guided meditations for a long time. I just want them to shut up and I just want space. I'm like, well, what are you doing in that space? Well, my mind goes everywhere. I'm not, I'm like, well, here's what I want you to do. I want you, and I talk straight with these guys, these dudes. I'm like, I want you to stop complaining about not liking this for a second and just do it like you're training and with your weapons. You don't always like what you're doing, but just do this guided one because what this guided meditation is doing is training your mind what to do for when you get to the quiet spaces. And he fought it and then he started doing because he heard the wisdom. I was being direct and strict with him, almost tongue in cheek, but he did start practicing it. And after a while, he goes, wow, my mind was never in my control. And now with this training that the guy, and I sent him Tara Brach. I didn't even send him my own. I'm like, look, here's someone I love listening to. Try hers and just do what she's asking you to do. Even if you want her to be quiet and you hear your mind go, just shut up, just do what she's asking. And after months, he's like, my mind is now more under my control than it was before. And when I get quiet, now it's a deeper quiet. But so I don't let people just get out of it right away if they're like, oh, I don't like it. Cause I'm like, there's kids in us that just fight things. I don't want to try broccoli because it's ugly and green. And you're like, after a while, you get a little ranch on it. You're like, oh, I can do it now, you know? So we're all big kids. And so, but yes, on the other hand, there are some practices that do feel like it scares us. I do a breath retention practice for some people and it can really scare them. So we don't do those practices because the breath retention puts them into a state of panic. And so we're like, okay, that is not good for your nervous system. We're not going to use that particular breath. That we're going to do a deeper, slower one. Breath of fire might be too much for some people who really need a lot less stimulation. So there is also that we do want to be sensitive to people's needs and the way the breath can either increase their anxiety or decrease it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's so interesting to think about the techniques and practices, and like you're saying, how sometimes the what feels like toxic or poison can be the cure, and sometimes it's
That's
toxic
right.
and good for us, right? And so
Right.
that's part of that, like dialing into, first of all, having a wise guide to support
Mm.
you with, and then also really doing that deep listening and understanding that it's a relationship not only with yourself but your practices. And
That's
so
right.
when you meet someone, you can be totally turned off by them. And then some people marry that person, you just don't know. You have to like you say, be mindful, go slowly, pay attention.
Yeah, pay attention and give it a little time. It might freak you out first, and I don't want to put people into a state of panic, but I'm also going to teach them how to deal with their panic. And if a breathing practice does put them into panic, we can slow down or stop or change, but also you can learn how to deal with yourself in a new way. Because a lot of us kind of run away from things we don't like, which sometimes that is important and we have to do that. But a lot of times we're just avoiding the difficulty of a practice, and practices are difficult.
Totally. And the other one I hear a lot, do you hear this as well, is how bored people are. And
Yeah.
and when I used to teach public meditation classes, I remember just one day being like, boredom is not going to kill us.
Hmm.
I think particularly as like Westerners, it's like, God forbid we were bored for a few whole minutes,
Yeah.
that practice, which, I'm sure you do too, right? Of getting curious about that boredom. And
Hmm.
then being able to even tolerate the muscle of boredom can help people later, not scroll so much or not, fill the blank, do these things that dysregulate our nervous systems even more. So those, like you're talking about, intolerable seemingly experiences
Yeah,
can really translate positively in the way of fruit in other areas, right?
absolutely. And what I found for myself and other people is when we're facing boredom, what I think actually happens is we start becoming more intimate with things that are hidden and subtle and
Mm,
also repressed. And so when we're saying I'm bored, what actually might be coming up is grief, or might be,
mm.
you know, we're not, I mean, what does boredom actually mean? I'm not enjoying this moment because it's not enticing or satisfying. I think underneath that, what definitely comes up for a lot of people are things they don't want to see or feel.
Really interesting. Yeah, that's brilliant. It makes so much sense because, of course, a lot of our lives we are running around and away from
Yeah.
things by numbing, because that's what our culture teaches us. Like, oh, something happens that feels hard, and so we equate that, like you're saying, as boredom, but really there could be a lot there. I totally concur with that. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's why even like the practices of meditation, often in my experience, they're not always positive at all. They can be really hard. And I'll
Totally.
say to people, like, no, it's not all like, bliss, love, whatever. It actually is, you know, it is this like creative petri dish where all sorts of things can happen. But I always say, like, but notice how you feel later. That to me
Mhm.
is always the litmus test of
Interesting.
meditation.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Because they're going to feel good in the end,
right.
generally speaking.
Right. I've had no one say to me, I hated and wish I didn't meditate ever, never in all these
Right.
years.
Right.
later, maybe during a lot, but
Yeah,
later.
during for sure, because it's so uncomfortable in the
Yeah.
beginning. And that can be years of having to face yourself. All we're doing is facing ourselves. And most of us are trying to avoid facing ourselves.
So good. So good. So good.
Hmm.
Exactly. Exactly. But in facing ourselves, the profundity is that then we, at some point, really come to know ourselves with
Yes.
capital S, right?
Yes, the deep self. And also we get to know the parts of ourselves that we've punished or pushed away or we're ashamed about, embarrassed about. We also get to know the parts that are wounded and are hiding or don't feel comfortable being seen because we don't know how to greet them with care and love.
Yeah.
That's what's often coming up in meditation from a lot of people. And I don't believe there's any growth without looking at ourselves. I don't think there's any growth without facing ourselves. That's not quite true. I mean, you can have incredible experiences that are spontaneous, or you can have terrible car accidents and you get to know yourself very closely in those moments too. But I'm saying conscious growth, the growth that we're all looking for, becoming wiser, more peaceful, more compassionate, more confident, we have to look at ourselves closely. And that's why I think meditation is actually one of the more powerful methods for that, because you can't escape when you're bored and when you're uncomfortable. It's like all right there for you.
All right there.
Hmm.
Totally.
Yeah.
What are some other practices that you like to recommend in addition to meditation, particularly because you've worked so much and you work so skillfully with trauma,
Hmm.
with PTSD? I know you mentioned nature in your answer, so
Hmm.
I'm assuming that's one of them. But yeah, could you share other things in
Sure.
addition to the meditation, in addition to the breath work, because you are such a master with this arena.
I want everyone to know that there are a whole, um, there are a whole like library full. Now I don't just mean books, but like inner library full of wisdom that you have, and you're all. I'm really speaking to everyone here. Each one of you has an innate abilities and your own genius that wants to come out and express itself. And that can be through dancing, through arts, through drumming, through being creative with music. So I'm not just, this is beyond just like healing trauma. This is actually like, how do we thrive even though we might have trauma? I'd rather answer like, I want you all to be dancing and drawing and drumming and trying burlesque shows, trying something you've never done before and finding confidence in new ways, going into nature and taking some days by yourself, or even 3 hours or even an hour in next to some trees or by a river, and then letting what's innate in you come out. So instead of just like answering in terms of here's all the things you can do for our trauma, which not a lot of us have it, I'd rather talk about what are some ways you can express your innate genius, innate
Mm,
potential. Do
so good.
new things, try new things. All
Right.
of us should be trying new things all the time.
Right. Totally. I like to talk a lot about passion. Like, I mean, people say passion, it almost sounds trite, just like, shadow work, blah, 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 but one of my favorite quotes that I try to live by is that Rumi quote, run towards every call that excites your spirit.
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah,
And I
I love that.
so that when you said that, it's like, yes, that's so good. I've never heard anyone talk about trauma and then that, and connect those two, but it makes so much sense because
Totally.
the things that light our souls up are the things that are going to heal our souls. So it's a
Yes,
really
right.
revelatory thing to say.
Yeah, I can totally talk about all the techniques that can help us, and you can all look that up. But inside of you is the universe, it's a library of the universe. And each one of us needs to start reading what's inside of ourselves and living toward that. And then you're going to learn through those things how to work with the wounded parts of us that do emerge and come out. I'd rather talk about that, and I think that that's a healthier way of being.
Yeah, I love that. Follow those sparks that will illuminate
Mhm.
everything. So
Yeah.
good. So good. Thank you.
You're welcome. That was spontaneous. Because I was going to be like, yeah, I could talk about breath work and grounding and and psychedelic medicine, which is all amazing stuff, and do all of that too. But why not just go toward our potential? Because we're going to live with what we have, and that stuff reduces when we're starting to live with our potential.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So true. And your first answer. I mean, to me, it's just the older I get in years, it just more and more is the answer in that going out in nature,
Hmm.
because the frequency of nature just tunes us to ourselves. I feel like it's a tuning fork. And
Hmm.
the more I live, the more I'm like a nature zealot about that. Even people who
Yeah.
think they don't like nature, like I'm like right now, I'm recording in the middle of a huge city,
Hmm.
but like I just go out on my days where I'm working like 12-hour days and I'll go to the trees and I'll hang out with the urban trees. And it's just incredible that little time, little park, how it just totally tunes me with myself. So
Yeah, I want everyone listening to know that nature has the power to heal us, truly. Not from every disease we have and not from all our maladies and our wounds. I don't believe that. I think there's a lot of good interventions for everything we're experiencing, much of what we're experiencing. But when I started going into nature for medicine, for the feeling, the vibe of nature and the wisdom of trees, and also I spend so much time with my dog, and I don't just mean like not just on hikes, not just petting him, but I study him. I'm feeling him out. I'm watching how he interacts, and I'm watching like how chill he gets, and I'm like, wow, I want to be that kind of chill. And then he plays without he just plays like a child, like a puppy. And I'm sometimes so fucking serious, and I'm like, I want to be more like my dog. So I like study nature because it's showing me a way of being that I was innocent and was taken from me, and I'm returning to it by being around things that are innocent, pure, like rivers and trees and animals and insects. Lots of healing potential in nature.
Yeah, I love that so much.
Mm.
Those things that, are outside our overculture, like you're saying. Like, talk to me about, like, just with me and I have a dog and a cat that I'm completely, I mean, probably codependent with. I love and but the regulation, like, of just, and I did this since I was a child, of just putting my head against their head and breathing with them. I feel like that is so powerful, to breathe with, meaning syncing my breath up with my pet's breath, because they
Yes,
are so
right,
pure,
totally.
right?
It's amazing, and there's tons of science and data on co-regulation of breath with other people, and there's a lot of science people can learn about earthing and grounding and spending time in nature. Our telomeres, our cells respond, the mitochondria in our cells respond to being with nature and with animals. So, I mean, this isn't just hippie talk. There's really good science, but beyond science, when I'm with my dog, regulating myself with him, my head on his head, or I mean, I actually calm down to the pace of like the earth to, and it is incredible how good I feel when maybe my mood was not so good beforehand. So I do want people to, who are listening, to realize, like, first of all, get a pet if you don't have one, and train them really, attune with them. I'm not dominant over him. We are actually attuned together. That's a part of what I'm talking about with nature. It's not me being dominant in nature and taking from. It's a symbiotic relationship, give and take equally. And so when I'm with my dog, it's actually him and I giving and taking. I'm listening to him as much as I'm asking him to listen to me. And that's where I actually grow.
Yeah, wow.
I didn't know I'd be talking about this today, but here we are.
That is so poignant, and I really like honor that. And it's been such an interesting exploration for me, because I have an older father who lives with me, and I got a wild young dog. And for a long time, I was felt pulled within myself of this dichotomy of, like, training and then having her behave because I wanted safety, and do no harm, for people around me,
Absolutely.
you know. And she is just this, like, crazy, feisty, wild spirit. And one day I looked at her and I was just like thinking of myself, and I was like, the things that were pissing me off about her and other people were actually things that, and qualities that I possess. And
Yes,
I
totally.
just had this moment where I was just like, screw all of this. I mean, she wasn't biting people. I'm not
Mhm.
talking, at this point, like, she was like, she wasn't, she's not going to win a prize. She's not everyone's favorite dog, but her wildness and her
Yeah.
feistiness, and I was like, I will not trade this out of her. I do not care anymore,
Mm.
And in that moment, you just articulated it so beautifully, was the moment like our relationship changed
Yeah.
into more of a symbiotic, like
Yeah.
you said so eloquently.
Hmm.
So beautiful. And just that give and take relationship, which of course is a whole nother podcast episode, even how
Yeah.
we are with the earth, how we are with our body, other people, and
That's
really
correct.
back to your first brilliant answer, how we are with ourselves.
Yes, that's right. So I want us to be clear. That is exactly what I'm talking about. We dominate ourselves. We make ourselves do things. I'm going to cry because it sucks what I do to myself sometimes. I force myself to, I'm self-employed, and I might be one of the worst bosses I've ever worked for. I like, my schedule is stupid sometimes, and I had to do a lot of deep work about, why am I doing this to myself? Why do I make myself work this way? Why am I dominating myself? My poor little innocent, playful soul is like, please stop making me work like this. And I'm like, no, here's why you have to do it. Dad will never love you unless you do it these ways. He's not even in the picture, and I'm still doing things for him, that are not even healthy for me. So
Right.
what I'm talking about is we learn to be symbiotic with our souls, our self, that young part of us that was not allowed to express itself or is dominated by others. And I'm learning how to do that with my dog and with other people. So now I'm starting to do that with myself. I don't want to hurt myself anymore. I want to support and encourage myself and give myself space to play, and so that this is what I'm really talking about, respecting ourselves deeply.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. And it just excites my spirit so much talking about it. And I just want to honor how, for people listening, how hard it is,
Mm,
because we live in the society that teaches us the opposite.
mm,
I was contemplating recently, like, the thought of, like, who would I be? What choices would I make and have made if I were, pushed out into this world, and then fast forward to me as an adult now, meaning, that child basically, and didn't have those indoctrinated
mm.
aspects of self, as you alluded to, like with a parent or this and this and that. And how many of my life choices, right, are from this unconscious place? And it's such a rabbit hole, but so important to think about, the reason.
Most of our choices, I'm sorry, I interrupted.
No, no, please. I want to hear what
Most
you
of
say.
most of our behaviors are coming from unconscious programming. My job with all my patients is helping them, and myself is helping us uncover. That's why I go to therapy. I'm like, why am I working myself this hard? And then I look at the programming, how I grew up, and the messages I received from our culture, Judeo-Christian, or kind of Puritan and Protestant work ethic, just embedded in the culture, the capitalistic kind of underpinnings of you are what you own, and your value is how much you produce and how much you can buy. These are ingrained deep in us, and then we're overworking and we're not taking breaks. We hardly give ourselves time off, and we're like, yeah, I only take 2 weeks off a year. I'm like, what? Ugh. That's awful for our spirit. But this is all programming. All our decisions are coming from there until we start waking up and going, why am I not living in alignment? I'm out of alignment of my own heart values. And so my job is to help people recognize their heart values and then start living those heart values in real time. And that is surprisingly difficult because we feel guilty, or we say we're selfish, or we're like gonna, disappoint other people when we're like, I don't want to do that anymore. But
Totally, totally. And
yeah.
what it like, I know it's like so huge, and there's like years of time and contemplation and copious amounts of potential psychotherapy, in addition to retreats and workshops, to even get to a place of beginning to do this uncloaking and uncovering and discovering. However, for those listeners who are like, where would I even begin, right?
Mhm.
What would be, in your mind, a few wise questions to embark on this particular journey? Because a lot of people, it's like, I don't even know, like, I think, they might feel the truth, and I'm sure a lot of people are listening to you right now and like jumping out of their skin, because the soul hears that truth,
Yeah.
and it's like, right? And
Mhm.
there's such resonance. But like, what are a few questions that
Sure.
people could embark on to begin that journey of uncovering?
Okay. First one, whose life are you living right now? Just think about that. Don't just go, that's a stupid question. I'm living my life. No. The work you're doing, the way you interact with people, and not all of us are misaligned. I understand that. Whose life are you living? Whose values are you living? Who are you pleasing? Like, in the choices you're making in your life, who are you pleasing?
Yeah, so
Why
good.
why are you doing the work you're doing? And I guarantee you, a lot of you listening are going, oh shit, I don't want to answer that because I hate my job, or I don't want to do this work, but it pays the bills, or I just fell into it. And a lot of us do need to just work to work for money's sake. But I think when we start looking at this, we can choose. It's hard. It's hard. It's really hard to talk this direct because there's so many circumstances that make living our authentic lives difficult. I just want to acknowledge that there's a lot of circumstances like oppression. There's so much oppression of women, of people of color, of gay folk, trans folk, of immigrants that do make it difficult to live kind of the way our hearts want us to. So sometimes it's not as easy as just waking up and going, F the system. Well, the system can be extraordinarily difficult and to navigate and actually oppress people on purpose. And so it's not as easy as just waking up to your heart's values. But what I'm talking about inside for you listening is your heart actually aligned? Are your deepest heart's values aligned with what you're doing in your life? These are questions I'd ask. Who are you pleasing and whose life are you living?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really,
Mhm.
really like mic drop, right? If you really give yourself that space and time.
Yeah.
And it can be too, perhaps, I'd love to hear your process with this, but perhaps it can be like a dharna too, because sometimes it's like the brain, at least for me, maybe it's just my brain, nobody else's brain, but starts thinking, and then the thoughts, there's this courtroom back and forth and cross examination, and it becomes so mental. And
Yes.
so then perhaps almost like in yoga they call it the dharna. There are ways to like throw it out, and then kind of like a stone, I think of it like throwing a stone in the river,
Mm.
and then letting the ripples expand outward back to you the answers. Do
Mm.
you work in that way at all too?
Give me an example of how you might use that to
That's
answer a riddle.
Yeah, like maybe asking the question, like, whose life am I living? Or who am I doing? Like, who am I trying to please? Something like that.
Mhm.
And then going to nature and not trying to figure out
Oh,
intellect
got you. Absolutely.
like
Take,
that.
hmm Sure. Yes. So yes, right. Take those questions, just plant them, put it in, but you do want to nurture these kinds of things, but you don't have to do it directly, like you're saying. Yes, you can journal about other things. You can draw, you can take time away from that question, but your soul is going to work on it now. You can't unhear what I asked you.
Yes.
That's what you're really saying.
I
Yeah.
love I love that is so good. You can't hear the question, Michael. Yeah. I mean, I try like in this podcast, my listeners know like I like to I can seem very flowy, but like to really go deep and ask these harder questions. I'm very very it's part of the impetus for this podcast, and that's so good. I love what you said about drawing it, like because
Mhm.
just back to your brilliant answer about being creative. You
Yeah.
can creative it, you could dance it, right? You
Yeah.
can.
You can express it in so many ways. Listen, our intellect is one small piece of the puzzle of who we are. We over rely on our cognitive sense of self and our intellect, which is it's like ping pong. There's going to be, and you might have four players at the ping pong table. So I listen to my body, ask the body's question. Listen, if all you listening take to heart my question, whose life are you living or who are you trying to please? Your body's going to say all kinds. You're going to have a lot of feelings in there if you really sit with that question. You're going to picture your mom. You're going to picture your dad or your spouse. You're going to picture your kids. You're going to picture, and then your body's going to have a reaction. And I'm going to ask you next, where are you in your own picture? Where are you in your own life's picture? Where are your heart's desires and values in the puzzle of your life? I was working with a wildland firefighter, and I asked him to list out all of the priorities in his life, and he wasn't on the list. And he
Mm,
didn't realize it until the very end that he was nowhere on his list.
mm,
And that hurt him. It hurt the core of him to recognize how devalued he feels in his own life, in his own body,
Yeah.
and how
Wow.
disconnected he is from himself.
Yeah.
When I ask these questions, your body, your wisdom, your mind, you're going to have a, an influx of information. Pay attention to all of it. It's all relevant. Just don't just listen to the mind though.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
So
why I say dance it or draw it or journal with your non-dominant hand so that you're not over like
I love that one.
thinking, you know?
Totally.
Hmm.
Totally. So good. And it'll look like scribble for most of us, but
That's right.
you'll be able to read it. And the great thing is that then your people can't.
That's right.
So if they're in it and they're in it too much, they won't even see with that non-dominant hand.
But your heart knows what it's writing, and it's usually very direct.
Totally. No, that's one of my favorite hacks for my clients and
Mhm.
myself. For me, it's my that left
Mhm.
hand writing, and it's huge. It's
Yeah.
huge. Actually, just last week I found something from a while ago,
Mm.
literally maybe 6 months ago, and it was literally illegible except like you just said, my soul knew, and I was like, how am I reading this?
Yeah.
It was about my podcast. It was amazing. It was right there, and it was
Mhm.
quite some time ago. So that's brilliant, amazing,
Yeah.
amazing. When you so many things I want to talk about, so I have to narrow down because time, that time space reality thing
Mhm.
that can be challenging for me. I rest, yoga nidra. I
Yeah.
love this practice. I love the practice so much, and to be pithy about it for the listeners, in my understanding, and I'd love you to elucidate it more, it's a practice about pulling the senses, drawing the senses inward. And it's like it's almost like an appetizer for meditation, is how I think about it.
Mhm.
Meditation, like the entree, and an iris is like the bruschetta, or, whatever appetizers or float your boat. So can you talk a little bit, please, about this practice of pratyahara, I rest, what it means to you, why you think it's valuable, anything you want to say.
Yeah, I actually think it does the whole kitten caboodle. Is that a thing people say? Anyway, it goes throughout. It goes kosha by kosha. Actually, it covers the whole entire spectrum of our existence, from the very gross to the extraordinary subtle, all the way to source itself. So I've meditated 25 years. I've done Buddhist meditation for that whole period, and simultaneously have studied yoga, philosophy, Kashmir Shaivism, and Advaita Vedanta, and also, the Hatha yoga I studied for a long time. And all of my all of my meditation life, yoga nidra has been the most profound and deepest practice. And I rest is my favorite form of yoga nidra. Not only is Richard Miller the founder, he's a dear friend, but also my personal teacher. But I love how he's translating these very complicated philosophies of Northern India, and even brings in Buddhism, um, but makes it extraordinarily practical. So for those listening, if you look up iRest, IREST, you'll find a lot of resources that are practical, and it really brings mystical teachings to us. But what it is, we're laying down essentially, and we're going through the koshas. We're bringing our awareness to the body, to our breath, emotions, our mental states, our intuition and wisdom, to joy, and then to pure awareness, and then formlessness. And so we're following that whole period. Excuse me, following that whole process. In the process, your body goes to sleep. Essentially, most people end up sleeping. And yoga nidra technically means awakened sleep, a state of awakened consciousness, but your body and brain are sleeping. And so you know this because people are snoring all around you, but your consciousness never goes to sleep. And I can tell you this because if you're snoring and I say wiggle your toe, you'll start wiggling your toe. Some part of you is always awake. And so yoga nidra connects you to the part that is always awake. And the more you practice it, you actually become awake while you're dreaming in real time. While you're sleeping, The advanced practice is you're fully awake while you're sleeping. I've seen dreams while in, like, I've been snoring and dreaming, but watching the whole thing. Completely, my consciousness is completely awake. And that's what happens on psychedelic medicine for me. I go incredible places like the cosmos, but I am always awake. I am at a place where I am just awake and aware of the whole phenomenon occurring. And I learned that through the yoga nidra practice, actually.
Yeah, I love that parallel you talked about with even dreaming and
Mm-hmm.
sharing your experience and articulating it in such a digestible, understandable way for the listeners. I know myself, for me, it's similar too with developing intuition and even psychic realms. You know, the
Mm-hmm.
deeper and more refined I've gotten in my meditation and doing yoga nidra, the deeper out I can go with psychic work and other that kind of work because of that practice of the witness space you're speaking
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
the witness, the eye consciousness. And wow, that was a fabulous, incredibly concise answer on a really broad topic. And yeah, for the listeners, definitely check out IRES. I love it. It's like he said, a really excellent modernized
Mm-hmm.
what's the word that
Method, practice. Yeah.
of that practice that is really esoteric. You can also go to Insight Timer or some of those free meditation apps and just type in yoga nidra, and there's some fabulous ones out there. I know a lot of clients that I have who have trouble sleeping. For those friends who have trouble sleeping, I think it can be amazing for, you know, really soporific, really helpful to support sleep. So thank you for sharing about that.
Yes.
What, just as we start to conclude, what is your, I don't even know how to ask this question, which is rare, but I want to tread lightly and I want to be broad because I'm so curious what you're going to say. So I'm going to hold it so much expanded space, sky mind here, sky question. What is your experience and or wisdom that you can offer in the way of what it is to be walking a path of healthy masculinity in the spiritual sector?
It's taken me 44 years to be able to answer this. I'm 44. So my answer comes from my whole life of making lots of mistakes, of learning and growth through real-time experiences, and of course watching healthy and unhealthy examples in the field. The work I've done most is around integrity, listening deeply, you know, integrity of like what would, not wanting to cause harm, and if I do, how do I clean it up? Of listening deeply to stories and examples and to women who have not been heard or validated in their experiences, so that I really take to heart people's experience and learn and grow from that. And that includes those I've made uncomfortable or hurt along the way. Deeper level now, it's about healthy masculinity is about learning how to raise the sexual energy from the lower chakras up into the heart. And I had to have a tantric teacher for 2 years teach me over and over how to have that feeling and move it throughout my whole body. And then my Buddhist teacher helped me realize, how do I center myself in the heart when I'm with women, so that this is where I'm relating and radiating from, so that I become a safe refuge. Before I was living in this place, I think I was dominated more by primal urges and energy that come out to be more about impulses, and it's hard to control yourself when you're impulsive and that energy is so wild. So for men to be really healthy, it's about awakening our sexuality into the whole body, and that it's joined with the heart,
Mm-hmm.
so that we are thoughtful and kind and compassionate and understanding, and we listen deeply, and we don't act from other places that are impulsive or base or primal. It's not about not being primal when it's right time to be primal. It's about being heart-centered all the other times. And yeah, these are the things I've been learning along the way. It's a really important question that deserves a whole podcast. It can't be answered here so quickly, but those things I think about are integrity, listening deeply, learning from people, being vulnerable and willing to say, oh, shoot, I've hurt people. How do I clean this up? And how do I grow? Where is my learning here? I think healthy masculinity is really about being embodied with strength and wisdom and heart,
Mm,
and moving from that space into the world.
mm. Yeah, that's a really, really authentic and thoughtful answer. Thank you. I love how you spoke about, because it ties into the tantra, the threads, the
Yes.
loom of conversation we're weaving, of feeling where these centers are, these energies within
Mhm.
yourself. Because I'm sensing, you didn't say this, but the way you gesticulated, like in your body, which
Yes.
back to what we spoke of in the beginning, and loving your emphasis on honoring and understanding the body as our spiritual GPS and our psychological GPS and all the GPSs,
Yes.
love how you spoke of, and thank you for that breadcrumb to follow for people listening who identify as male, about where their different impulses arise from physically, energetically, and
Hmm.
hopefully getting support to learn how to move that energy if needed, and dexterously work with that. And
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
that you talked about, so thank you, just also cleaning up your side of the street, you know what I mean? I think about that too, even when I was running a community and people viewing you as like a spiritual teacher, when you're just human. And I know we spoke about this a little bit before we hit the record button, just the idea of being a mystic is being conscious, and then rolling up your sleeves and cleaning up your shit,
Mhm.
all
Yeah.
the things, and understanding that in doing so, that can be actually sometimes the most powerful teaching for others.
It is actually. It shows so much about grace and love and forgiveness and holding yourself accountable, and maybe taking time to do the work and showing you care, because a lot of us make mistakes. Most of us aren't malicious. Most people aren't misusing power on purpose to hurt others. That does happen, and that is out there. Most of us are unconscious, and our impulses and our behaviors are so conditioned, we're not even aware of what we're doing. We're just doing something, and then we're like, well, why isn't that working? Or how did I hurt that person? But then when you start really watching yourself, you can see very clearly, oh, I was not awake to this. I was not awake to what I was doing. And then now we have what we call remorse, not shame, but remorse. I spent most of my life in shame. I'm moving to remorse. Shame is punishing and it hurts so bad. But remorse is like, I wish I didn't do that. And I'm really sorry I did. I'm going to clean myself up so I can be a better human being. So man, those of us who are teaching, or especially male who are teaching, we have an extra duty to do this work and then learn about our bodies and where our energy resides, and move it to the heart center, move it into the whole space of us, so that we're relating from that space.
Yeah, that's a gorgeous answer. You said so many things today, but that truly really is hitting the mark of my heart, and I feel like is really so helpful for people listening. So thank you for that
Mm.
wisdom.
You're
Would
welcome.
would you mind offering like a one-ish 3 minute, whatever you want, just little kind of
Oh,
centering,
sure. I would love to. Yeah.
something, I said appetizer earlier, so maybe like a little dessert.
Okay. I love that request. So everybody listening and us too, we get to practice together. Right now we're creating a sangha, a satsang. We're joining our hearts together, all of us listening for all of time. As this will be listened to at different times, we're joining into a larger community of people who are wanting to awaken. So what a cool thing we're getting to do right now. If you're comfortable closing your eyes, take a moment. And even before we officially begin, drop your mind into the body. Feel the body on the chair, the cushion, the couch. Drop your mind into the body. Already we're here. Let's take a deep breath in. Inhale. Let's sigh. Down the body, through the seat bones, down the feet. Another deep breath in. And sigh. Resting your body, resting the mind. Feel the body's response. And one more deep, luscious breath in. Hold the breath for just a moment. Feel the expansion of the body. And exhale slowly out the nose, down the body. Keep exhaling. And feel the body's response. For just a moment, open your awareness around you to the room, the house or building you're in. Notice all the sounds, the feeling of the room itself. Notice life living itself around you. And now bring your mind's attention to your own heart beating. Rest your mind on the heart beating. Just feel the vibrant heart, each beat like a drum or a beacon. And let the heart fill the body. Just rest. Rest here in the space of the heart. Take a deep, slow breath into the heart. And a nice, gentle breath out. And without losing this embodied presence, gently open the eyes. Just being. All of our hearts beating. Beacons of hope and love into the world around us. And thank you.
Thank you. That was such a truly palpable and restorative and deep dive. Really, really, thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Dr. Michael Sapiro, where can folks find out about you and your scintillating work in this world?
My website, michaelsapiro.com, and Instagram, Dr.Mike-Boise, Dr. Mike Boise. Those are the two good places. I'm around a lot of places, but those are the fun ones to find me.
Amazing. Well, I'm thrilled for my monthly Mystic members who are receiving 2 articles from Michael. I read one of them today and half of the other one, and they're so well written. I'm not surprised,
Thank you.
but like this conversation, like an arrow hitting the target. One is healing traumatized body through grounding practices and nature as mythic healer. So if you aren't a monthly Mystic member yet, you can go over to my Mystic membership. It's on my website, modernmystic.love. And I've got my unlimited yoga, meditation, mindfulness, breathwork library there for $33 a month. And you can support this podcast by doing so. And there's also astrology lessons and tarot card lessons and Mystic hack, how to work with your energy lessons over there. So check that out. And I just want to say, Michael, thank you so much for your presence, your wisdom, and your time today. You're really, really a very deep and bright teacher.
Mhm.
I know our listeners have already benefited so much from words and know they will, I'm sure, share this episode with others. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much. And I'm really, really glad to be on here with you. Thank you.
So much. Namaste.